Good afternoon, Lieutenant Governor. Thank you so much for being with us. We really want your views to help the voters on the State Central Committee help know how to evaluate the candidates for Lieutenant Governor. Since you've been the Lieutenant Governor for 8 years, we know you'll have lots of wisdom to share. So I have about 1 million questions to ask you. And the first one is when other people think about what the lieutenant governor it does and what it really means to be lieutenant governor, they might assume it's simply being second in command. What does the job actually entail on a day-to-day basis?
I just have to say, first of all, is how grateful that I am to have been able to serve in the role of lieutenant governor over the last 8 years. I've had county elected official positions that I've held. I was a state senator, and but being in the executive and lieutenant governor's office has been a tremendous sense of pride in the work that we've been able to do. And while some may not fully understand or grasp what the potential is of the lieutenant governor's office, it's far more than just being a second in command or governor in waiting. And I say that from a sincere perspective because coming into this office and recognizing that we have a lot of work to do. And I think that number one is recognizing your relationship with the governor is by far the most important aspect of how a lieutenant governor can or cannot be successful in that office.
Oh, that's so interesting. So, what responsibilities took up more of your time than you really expected?
I have to say that, I had the fortunate opportunity to work with two who I feel is the best governor in the history of the state of New Mexico. It's Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham, the hardest working governor across the country. And I'm not just saying that, just say it for people to see the relationship that we have, but I say it because I truly mean that. And so working with her, we had an amazing agenda from the very beginning. The governor was making sure that we were going to prioritize education, which is my background, and recognize that we were going to have a moonshot. And I was appreciative of that. But the role of lieutenant governor goes far beyond just one sector. And the opportunity to bring my experiences as a state senator, as a person that comes from rural New Mexico, it's been a tremendous opportunity and very grateful for it. Now, when you ask about specifically what is it that has consumed most of my time, one of the areas that is most important as being lieutenant governor is you're the state's ombudsman, and meaning that when there's issues that are happening with state agencies, when constituents aren't feeling like they're getting the results that they need, our office is where they come to. And I know that people across the state have learned that to recognize, to rely on the ability for our lieutenant governor's office and staff to help navigate some of those areas. So it was one of those areas that continually is consumes us quite a bit, but probably the most rewarding. We have to remember that we came from a COVID pandemic. None of us ever expected to have to deal with that. And that in itself was such a challenge, and recognizing how we can maneuver meeting every day virtually, getting introduced to that virtual aspect of the virtual world. I thought we navigated pretty well.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And we're such leaders in education for childhood education. Do you want to mention that at this point, what the moonshot accomplished?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that when we shared about what was important to us from day one, we were going to take the approach from cradle to career. And the governor's lived up to that. And we worked together in many ways of helping to promote that, not only in our state, but across the country. And so what we've done as a leader across the nation, across the world, when it comes to early childhood education, we've been able to establish that, recognizing that the K-12 system, a lot of efforts need to be done in that area, starting with our professionals and recognizing that our educators are the highest paid now across the whole region of the United States. That is something that we take a lot of pride in because it is those professionals who are daily working with our students to help them reach their potential, but then extending out to our higher education areas and recognizing that the opportunity for taking away the financial struggles that come in. Our New Mexico graduates now can see that they have a fully funded lottery scholarship and the promise of an opportunity scholarship. So it really is cradle to career. And what a wonderful initiative that we've been able to accomplish with that.
I'm sure you're so proud of it and should be. It's just great. What parts of the jobs do you think are the least well understood by the public and even by people who are interested in politics?
I think that there's a lot of belief, like what does the lieutenant governor do? And the reality of it is that you make this office whatever it is that you'd like it to be. Again, going back to the most important aspect is you have to have a good relationship with the governor. By having a good relationship with the governor, as me and Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham have been able to establish, you now open up the opportunity to work directly with all of your state agencies, all of your cabinet secretaries, where the bulk of the work is done. A lot of times, questions that may be asked, well, what does a lieutenant governor do? Getting out there into the rural communities. I've taken great pride in making sure that I travel this state from end to end, recognizing that not all people can get to Santa Fe. It's important that we take Santa Fe to them. So that was one of the areas that really isn't fully understood. The other piece of it is the decisions that are made that aren't going to necessarily be in the headlines or aren't going to be in the news cameras, because the governor, rightly so, will be delivering those messages. But the discussions that are taking place in our negotiations, in our discussions to find ways to have solutions, you're definitely a part of that, again, by having that opportunity and the invitation from the governor's office, which every step of the way I've been fortunate to have.
So have there been times when your role was to challenge ideas privately while supporting decisions publicly? And how do you balance loyalty with honest advice?
Well, loyalty goes both ways, and I think that's important to recognize. You know, the loyalty that I share with the governor is the same loyalty that she shares with me, and that extends out to our cabinet members and our agencies. And so, recognizing that I come from the background of education, I was a coach for many years. I didn't want to have assistant coaches who were going to be yes men and who were just going to go along with everything that I felt we needed to do. It's important that we have those discussions, and we've had several of those discussions is in finding ways to come up with the best possible scenario and solution. The governor was always open to that. Doesn't mean that we always agreed. Doesn't mean that at the end of the day, I didn't have the final say, but we didn't go out into the public and in any way to try to shorten the vision of what it was that was done. So me and the governor always stood shoulder to shoulder, and it went both ways, where she stood with me and I stood with her. So there was several occasions where we did have disagreements, but at the end of the day, we are always a team.
That is fantastic to hear because it's such a waste of time, if nothing else. If you start fighting for the heck of it. So what does the successful relationship between the governor and lieutenant governor really depend on? Is it that loyalty or is it something else, another quality?
You know, we're fortunate because I do sit on the executive committee of lieutenant governors across the country. And I talk to lieutenant governors on both sides of the aisle all the time. And, you know, we're rare because most lieutenant governors and governors do not have the relationship that we have here in New Mexico. And so for us, I was fortunate because me and Governor Lujan Grisham, we've had that relationship for years when she was a county commissioner, when she was in Congress, when she was a cabinet secretary. We've known each other and of the work that was done. So working together is something that came natural, but it really is revolved around trust and knowing that the governor trusts that if you're going to be in front of a camera, that you're going to continue to share the messages and the vision of what this administration is going to do. It's about trust and knowing when you're going to leave, when she leaves the state or the country, that she's not going to come back like in other states where executive orders are issued or executive orders are undone and things that are done to undermine the governor's role. I think that's especially critical because recognizing that we are a team, that we always know in constant communication, and this extends out to the staff. And I think that's an important component because you can have the governor and the lieutenant governor have a wonderful relationship, but you have to have that same relationship between your staff and their staff, as well as the lieutenant governor and their staff. And every day that I've been in office, I've been fortunate to be able to pick up the phone at any time and be able to communicate with the staff of the governor's office.
That's great. That's great. So let's move on to what it's like to run the Senate. What are the skills that are most important for being able to conduct all the Senate's business?
Well, I'm an educator. And as I shared earlier, you know, a lot of those qualities and skills that you bring in, classroom management, a lot of the strategies of what needs to be done, you know, I incorporated a lot of that into my role as lieutenant governor, knowing the debates that take place, knowing the process and the decorum that was required. You know, I had that advantage. Hadn't served under Diane Danish and John Sanchez, when they were lieutenant governors and I was in the role as a senator, and recognizing that that is maybe the most visible job that you do as lieutenant governor is you're presiding over the Senate. It definitely takes patience. It takes the understanding, that political savvy to know what's happening in front of you and what could be taking place around the corner. You would see me as the lieutenant governor, oftentimes in the most stressful and the most chaotic of moments, that I would keep a straight face, maintain that composure that was calm and reassuring that we're going to get through this, and having the opportunity to pick up the phone at any time. And you would see me oftentimes on the camera picking up the phone and speaking with members of both sides of the aisle and having those discussions. So I didn't have to go over over the microphone on the cameras and to embarrass any senators or to have them back off or to cool down a little bit. I would do it through phone call and to do it direct communication. And that was the most effective strategy that I think that I could have done, even in those most intense moments.
That's really interesting that you could kind of do it on the side and not bring it to the forefront. I didn't know that.
It
I
goes,
just thought it was all natural.
it goes back to the multitasking and the educator in me.
Yeah. Okay. Can you think of a particularly difficult parliamentary or procedural decision and what you learned from it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think that there's constantly decisions that you have to make, and you ultimately will have the final say in reason. So when I say within reason, because the Senate can always overrule the ruling of the chair, and so I think that that happens at times. There's oftentimes there's parliamentary questions that come up, and for me as a lieutenant governor, I knew that it was important that the senators, 42 members, are elected by their constituents all over the state. They have earned that platform to be able to share their views, to be able to do so within reason and a respect of what their constituents are asking for them to make sure that they can vocalize. I have to make sure that I allow for that room to take place. If I see that it's getting a little bit too carried away, if it's getting a little too intense, then I'll calmly, most of the time just by my look, will be able to scale that back. And that worked out pretty well. So when you look and see as far as the potential that the next lieutenant governor coming in, I think your composure, your calmness, I think the ability to navigate those situations is key. And I always remembered a quote that was shared with me is saying, remember during crazy times, look for the calmest person in the room. That is your leader. In the state Senate, that calm person needs to be the president of the New Mexico Senate.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And it's nice that you're not just putting it as keep a poker face. It's really making room for a diversity of viewpoints and keeping calm in all of it. I love that. So being ready to become governor is an important part of being lieutenant governor. How should voters think about that responsibility?
I truly appreciate that question because, well, there's a lot of discussion taking place of what's going to happen in November and who's going to be elected as governor and running us as a state within the next administration. That's the piece that I think that is often missed is the discussion is like, who do we put on the ticket to win the election in November? Well, the reality of it, I look at January 1st and beyond and seeing that the role of lieutenant governor is absolutely critical. So the question that has to be asked is if something should ever happen to the governor-elect or the person that is in that governor's seat, that they are no longer able to serve, from day one, that lieutenant governor must be ready to step in. That lieutenant governor now becomes a governor and making the decisions that has all the powers to be able to direct agencies in the way that they see fit. That is why this role is extremely important, that when decisions are made, ask yourself the question, who is ready to lead from day one should you become the governor?
What would you think are the most important qualities to have on day one and the most important experience to have?
The role of lieutenant governor to be successful, it doesn't start on the open day of the session. It doesn't start when you get sworn in. Once the election happens in November, and as I'm confident that we're going to be successful once again in the state to be under a Democratic administration, that's when the work begins, is the lieutenant governor starts meeting with all members of the state Senate, not just Democrats. You're meeting with Democrats and Republicans, going to their home area, asking them what's important, making sure that you can have those discussions of their priorities on what they're coming into the session and the agendas that they're bringing. that's when the work begins. And recognizing that as a lieutenant governor, you have the ability to maneuver a lot of the discussions, to bring forward a lot of ideas, but making sure that you build those relationships. Again, I want to stress you must build those relationships on both sides of the aisle, because the state Senate is made up of those 42 members that require a leader who's going to be fair, who's going to be firm, and be experienced to navigate some of the turbulence that you come into.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when you start right after the election, I think you have a pretty full agenda between then and January. Is there something in your background that's important to bring in with you? Is it something that qualifies one candidate over the other by experience, previous experience?
I think that there's a lot of opportunities that can be brought to the table. And I think experience, it does matter. I think that you have to understand how you can navigate not only the rules and the parliamentary procedures and the Mason rule of law or Robert's rule of orders. I mean, those are components that you'll learn along the way. So I'm not really concerned about that. But what I would like to have in lieutenant governor and, in your governor and your agencies is the political savviness too, of how to be able to navigate to get to the point where we get what's needed across the finish line. I think that's key. And again, that's built with relationships on both sides of the aisle. Most of the issues that we undertake in the state Senate and in the legislature are pretty much agreed upon by both parties. It's those difficult ones that you're not going to come to an agreement. How can you navigate where there's honest debate that's taking place? How can you get to the point where a vote is actually going to happen, and the numbers speak for themselves, that will allow it to go into the next chamber or up to the governor's office? That's the role of lieutenant governors, to make sure that you're able to navigate that, to make sure that there is a vote that takes place, and ultimately the governor to have a say on what happens to that piece of legislation.
Is there a red flag that you can pick up? If somebody doesn't have the temperament or background to be able to be that savvy?
Well, I think it's a trial and error process in many ways. As a state senator, I was taught that you listen a whole lot, and you only speak if you have something significant to say. And that has served me so well, because as lieutenant governor, I observe what the senators are doing. I observe their body language. I observe their tone on their skin. I observe the way that they just handle themselves, and know that that's maybe when I need to pick up a phone before they get on the microphone to calm that down, and to have the ability to see what's around the corner before it actually takes place. One rule that I had, and I am so proud of, is that both leaders, the minority and the majority leaders, who I absolutely enjoyed working with, whether it was the current ones that are in place now or previous ones that were there, the number one rule that we had is, I will allow you to give your piece, to share your debate, and to do so. But the one thing I always asked is, never blindside me, because I still have the responsibility to navigate the state Senate, and I have to make sure that I can drive the ship. If I'm blindsided, then they would know that they crossed a line that was something that I did not appreciate. And that nearly happened the very last day of the 8 years I've served. I felt that I did get blindsided, and immediately had a discussion with both majority floor leader and minority floor leader, and we put the train back on the tracks, and you would never have known.
Elaborate on that?
Yeah, there was, I try not to. One of the things that's kind of funny about the lieutenant governor's office is I felt like I was back in the classroom, because there's times when we started at 11 a.m. I may not leave that chair until 10 p.m. or 11 p.m. That means that very little time do I have to get a restroom break. But it so happened that I did take a restroom break the last day of the session, and I walked to the restroom, and I could hear over the intercom, because I'm always listening, always making sure things are running smooth. And I hear there's a call of the Senate. And I was not aware that was coming. Immediately, I went back in there, and I was angry, and tried to get everything back in order. Fortunately, we had our President Pro Tem, Mimi Stewart, who was able to stay in the chair when I called both the majority and minority floor leader, and there was some tempers that were flying. I was upset too, because I felt that, again, in the 8 years that I've been there, I never felt that I had been blindsided. And we had the discussion, and we had the disagreements. But at the end of the day, we all left, took a break, had the majority, the Democrats, meet with their caucus, the minority, the Republicans, meet with their caucus, and come up with a plan to put everything back on track to ensure that we can get through the last night of the session. We can get the important pieces of legislation that the public was expecting us to get to, and to do it in a way that the public never even knew about what was going to take place in the state Senate had those discussions not taken place.
Wow, that's pretty devastating if you hadn't been on your toes and listening all the time. Oh, that's amazing. What personal qualities do you think are more important than experience or political accomplishments?
Well, you got to have integrity. I think having the integrity and knowing that you don't always have to say what you do, but you always must do what you say. And so I think having that trust and that confidence in every one of those 42 members, every one of our cabinet secretaries and the governor, to know that they can count on you, and what you say is the word is going to be held through. And I think that that's important because that's a quality that comes in. So the trustworthiness, the loyalty, the experience, all those qualities are key. But I can't stress enough the most effective quality that you can have as a lieutenant governor and in any elected office is connectivity. Having the connectivity to be able to ensure that even through disagreement, that doesn't mean that disrespect has to come. You can have disagreement while being respectful. You can have different viewpoints, but recognizing that the connectivity is by far most important in running this job.
Wow. Well, you've mentioned that you serve as the leader for both sides of the aisle. How important is that ability to build relationships across different factions of government to the success of a lieutenant governor?
More now than ever. We can't go a day, an hour without seeing the division that's happening in across the country, and it's unfortunate because I know that the tone at the top really sets the pathway of how the public is going to respond. It was always my goal to ensure that the tone at the top was going to be open, receptive, accepting that everybody has different viewpoints. And so I think that that is a key, that is recognizing that is creating that tone from the top, and recognizing that that not only is for the role of the state Senate, but that's the role that you have in going into different communities, and recognizing that it's not just about the work that's done in the Senate chamber. I get graduation announcements from Republican members for their kids. I get, requests to speak at funeral services for members of the minority party. I get, invitations and requests to speak all the time for members of our majority party. And I think that that really is a testament that the connectivity was there, and I'm grateful for that.
Yeah, I'm sure it really matters. So we need to talk a little bit about what the voters should evaluate. These may be the most important questions that we go through today. If you were advising the voters who had to choose between two well-qualified candidates, what characteristics would you encourage them to evaluate?
Yeah. Again, it goes back to most importantly, your relationship with the governor. And I can't stress that enough, because across the country, when I see most of the time governors and lieutenant governors not have that relationship, you have a fractured administration. Having that relationship with the governor, and in this case, Governor Holland, is going to be extremely important, that you work hand in hand, that you can have disagreements, but you can move forward. I think that is key. Other qualities and characteristics that I would see that they would have to have is just recognizing that you have to be experienced. You have to be willing to work. You can be a lieutenant governor who sits back, doesn't do much, there behind the governor when the governor has a press conference, or you can be a lieutenant governor who's about action and getting out there, whether they're the fires that happen in Mora and Las Vegas, to the floods that are in Roswell, to what takes place when we're in a pandemic, to going in to be a graduation speaker at the end of a school year. Those are the kind of things that you're available, that you're accessible, that you're respectful, and that people know that you are a representation of the state of New Mexico the way that we deserve.
Love it. The way that you talk about it, just the spectrum of issues that you've had to deal with in the past almost 8 years, it's just kind of incredible, really, that you can just tick those off and say, yeah, that's what we deal with as a lieutenant governor. What do you wish every voter would ask a candidate for lieutenant governor?
I want to have the voters ask, what is your vision? What is your belief that you can be as lieutenant governor that can truly have an impact? And to recognize and see about those impacts that take place, you got to remember you're a team. It is important that no lieutenant governor ever tries to take the spotlight or to jump in front of your governor, because the people of the state of New Mexico elected your governor to lead the state. Your role is to be there supportive, to be there as advisor at times when it's needed, and to be there when the governor isn't available, and do it in a way as if people never felt that they were dismissed or they were slighted because the governor wasn't able to be in attendance. I think that those are important qualities that people should ask those that wish to serve in the role of lieutenant governor, is ability to get out there and to work. Both candidates that we have displayed that, and they share that they are willing to work. The key is when the credit is not given and recognize of the work that's been done, you also have to be humble and to recognize there's a bigger picture. And the bigger picture is the betterment of the state of New Mexico. And I was always proud in what we accomplished as an administration, to see the governor on MSNBC, to see her on national TV, to get the recognition, the credit that she truly deserved, and knowing that I had a small part of that to have her have that success, because the people across the state of New Mexico were benefactors of that.
Yeah, and you made New Mexico be so much more a leader than when you guys walked in the doors, that's for sure. What's something that you wish you knew when you took office?
As lieutenant governor, as a senator, you go in and you serve your interim committees. You do the work that's on the Senate floor, but there's so much more to the lieutenant governor role. There's constitutional requirements you got to have. So as the on state board of finance, we make decisions every single month that have huge impact across the state of New Mexico, whether it's emergency funding that is needed in Animas, New Mexico, to decisions that we have to make to fund state agencies. Most of the time, you're going to chair the State Board of Finance, and that's absolutely critical. But when we look at other issues like housing and recognizing that you sit on that board, when you look at other issues like Spaceport America, and you look at other things that you do as lieutenant governor, I think is absolutely critical. And along with one area that's kept me busy has been the Military Base Planning Commission, to recognize that we have 3 military bases and White Sands in our state that are huge economic impact to New Mexico. How can we incorporate that, and a leader that can go to Washington and have those discussions and to navigate the politics of it? And to do so, there's a whole lot more that goes with the duties of being on those boards.
Yeah, I imagine so. Um, if you had 3 pieces of advice that you could give to the incoming lieutenant governor, what might they be?
Always be a person of your word, making sure that you're following up on what it is that you're asked to do. That you have to understand that while you are an elected official and you make the decision, when a tiebreaker vote comes, you have to make that decision and be ready to do so. So educate yourself. Having the opportunity to make a decision and to see decisions being made and remain humble throughout the whole time, I think that's critical. Again, it goes back to you're there to serve as a assistance to the governor, to the cabinet secretaries, to the administration, to get the goal across. And so recognizing that you're not the final decision maker, but you can have a hand in that if you have that relationship with the governor.
Great. And I know we've talked about the importance of the moonshot for education. Is that the accomplishment you're most proud of that people rarely hear about, or is there something else that would like to talk about what you've done in the office that you're most proud of?
Now, there's a lot of things that I'm proud of. I think the last day of the session was something that really brought a lot of pride, because hearing the senators and the appreciation that they shared about fairness, appreciation that they shared about being firm, but at the same time is recognizing the human part and the compassionate part that they each shared. That was very gratifying to me, because I knew that I did my job. I did my job to be fair, to preside in a way that every member felt that they were just as important as the other, which they are. So that's one area that I am proud of. I think that what we've done when it comes to education, I shared from K-12 to higher ed and early childhood. I'm extremely proud to see that we now have a state agency for early childhood education. That wouldn't have happened had the governor not made that a priority. She made it a priority. And I was proud because when I was in the state senate, I carried that piece of legislation. Didn't get very far, but being in the executive, we saw that through. Now we're a leader across the country, and we're recognizing that people are asking us, how did you make it happen to have universal childcare? But I have to say, the parts that I'm most proud of is the parts that'll never come up in a newspaper article. They'll never be in a news in a news camera interview. It's the single mother who is about to lose their home because they weren't getting what was needed from their benefits from Workforce Solutions, or when you saw that there was issues that are taking place with PFAS and Cannon Air Force Base and working together with the federal government to recognize that we had responsibility to take care of our landowners. It is those personal moments that when you go into a person's house, because there was floods in La Union, New Mexico, that wiped out people's homes, and being there, seeing the loss and helping them navigate through that to get back on their feet, that is what makes the lieutenant governor role to me most important and most effective, because you're connected to the people that have elected you.
It's got to be so gratifying and satisfying to know that you make that difference for somebody. Well, as we get to the end of this time, would you address the State Central Committee pretty directly? Imagine you're speaking to them, and they're gonna choose the party's nominee. Without commenting on any individual candidate, what advice would you give them about selecting someone who is truly prepared to serve as New Mexico's next lieutenant governor?
Yeah, thank you. And I first want to say thank you to all of our SCC members. Most stressful times that running the statewide campaigns, which I ran in plenty of them, was during that SCC process. And I want to thank all the members for the support that you've always given to me personally as a candidate and having me and helping me to get on a ballot. So thank you for the work that you do, for your willingness to be on this interview, to listen and to learn of what makes oftentimes the often misunderstood office of lieutenant governor, what makes it work. I think that that's important, that we recognize that while choices are made, I would ask that you ask yourself on day one, who is ready to step in to take control of the Senate and navigate it in a way that it's going to be done understanding all aspects, from finance to education to land issues to issues that are dealing with the federal government, and recognizing that area, and to ask yourself, if something should ever happen to the governor, who would be willing to step in and to lead this state, because by Constitution, they are now the governor of the state of New Mexico. And I would advise that you ask that question and you let your gut guide you of who can best guide us, should that happen.
Wow, great advice. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. We really appreciate your time, and I'm sure the SCC members will take what you've said to heart. I certainly hope so, and I imagine they will.
Yeah, and I just would like to end off saying, regardless of how this vote goes, the overall goal is that we have to ensure that we are united, that in November we choose Deb Haaland as our next governor of the state of New Mexico, that we have an opportunity to make history across the country once again, and that regardless if your candidate is chosen or not chosen, that we unite as one and recognize that New Mexico deserves nothing less than having the best of their leaders working together at all times.
Marvelous. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.